Our next story brings us to the historic East Village of Des Moines. The East Village is one of the original marketplaces in the Des Moines area and has been in existence for over 150 years. It's also home to the Iowa State Capitol building. In 2000, many of the buildings in the East Village were scheduled for demolition, but were eventually saved along with their rich history. Now, those same buildings are home to many popular restaurants, shops, and apartment housing. This Iowa entrepreneur story takes us to Raygun, a shop in the East Village that brings a modern edge to this historic area.
We sell clothing, we do our own screen printing, our own design, so anything from like posters, pint glasses, coasters, t-shirts, everything. But we only design and print for the store. We don't do any custom screen printing.
Mike Draper, founder of Raygun, grew up in Iowa, but had his sights set on getting out and seeing the world.
I was born at Lutheran Hospital, which is only 6 blocks away, so geographically I have not come very far in my life. I don't know what, when I was in school, my main goal was to leave Iowa, which is, it turns out, a really easy goal to meet. There's several clearly marked exits in Iowa. I went and studied history at the University of Pennsylvania, and once I got out east, it was kind of like, well, mission accomplished. Those 4 years in college, I didn't study business, I didn't study printing or design, but my senior year, a friend suggested that we start selling t-shirts. If you're starting from the bottom, in the world of t-shirts, the bottom looks like standing on a corner and selling t-shirts out of a bag. Not really what I think my parents envisioned when I started college.
Selling t-shirts wasn't his plan either. With a bachelor's degree from an Ivy League school, Mike had goals to continue his education and stay on the East Coast.
I had applied for a fellowship to get a master's, and sometimes you don't always make major decisions. Life kind of makes those decisions for you. And so I went the t-shirt route because I got rejected for the fellowship route.
Without any money or desire to further his education, Mike had to make a tough decision. He brought his t-shirt business, called Smash at the time, back to Des Moines and set up shop. But with only a little money, sacrifices had to be made. Mike moved back home and into his parents' basement while Smash was getting off the ground.
Well, I only worked in my parents' basement. I still resided in my old bedroom. So that was up on the second floor, so I did have a view. So I don't know really what my parents were thinking if they thought, oh, I'm in like a transition phase. And yeah, you can stay in your old room for a while and we'll see how it pans out, and then you can go to grad school at some point. There are certain things that you just have to suck it up and say, you know what, this is what I do. I'm in the service industry now, and there's no money to start a big company, so I have to start a tiny company and just work constantly. There's no money for an apartment, so I'll stay with friends. There's no money for a print space, so I'll use my parents' basement. And you just kind of have to do what you need to do to get by. So in the beginning, we would come up with slogans, and then I'd go to a screen printer and have maybe 100 of them printed, and then I would take them and sell them and then get more. So there were, there were cost issues in that it's cheaper if we do it ourselves, there's more flexibility. But mainly it's just hard to find good people to work with. Things were always not done on time, not done right, prices were changing, and I just thought, man, I don't even know how to screen print, but I could probably do it better than most of the guys who were doing it for me. A friend of mine from Van Meter had a screen printing, his dad had a screen printing shop, and so I moved back. He taught me how to screen print. With the money I had made selling t-shirts out east, I bought the equipment.
For the first 2 years, Mike was the lone designer, screen printer, and salesman. He was constantly working. Mike's move back to Des Moines soon revealed a hidden benefit.
One of the reasons I moved back to Iowa was looking for a niche market. It was tricky to figure out exactly what I wanted to make content about, but I noticed that the inside jokes about specific areas, like jokes about colleges on their campus, did far better than just general shirts. And so I kind of looked back towards Des Moines. I'm like, well, there's this area and I'm already privy to all of the inside jokes. I should just go back and start a store with stuff about Des Moines, which seems kind of insane. Look, I mean, it's one of those things where it's obviously worked well looking back at it, but when I was projecting out forward, it's like a guy with no printing experience, no retail experience, no business or design experience is going to leave the East Coast and move back to Des Moines to open a store and have really positive Des Moines-based slogans. I mean, it takes a lot of imagination to see how that turns into this.
Mike was ready to take Smash to the next level. Achieving that was no easy task. More risks needed to be taken, and since he was Smash's only employee, all responsibility fell on his shoulders.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's like trial by fire. If somebody gave you a list of all the things you needed to do to start a company, you probably would not do it. You're answering every single question. It's like the first time in your life where when you're the only person working at a company, if you didn't do it, it did not get done. It's not one of those like, oh, I didn't show up to class. It's not like class didn't happen. It's you're sick one day, the store is not open. You don't make any money that day. You realize it's sometimes not the lack of big ideas that do people in. It is the like mountain of tiny little things you have to do like day in and day out to take care of.
Mike's store not only offered t-shirts, but also custom screen printing services.
And that wasn't necessarily any grand business strategy. It was just that I had screen printing equipment and needed money. So anybody who would pay for shirts, I would print them. As the company grew, we added employees on kind of both sides. So either you were doing the custom work or you were doing the retail work. And then 2009, we split into two companies, Raygun on one side, 8-7 Central on the other side for custom work. And then I sold 8-7 Central to focus solely on growing Raygun. Opened, in Iowa City in 2010. We got into some cut and sew with a line of jeans in 2011. Almost bankrupted the company, but did not.
Although Raygun jeans did not pan out, Mike was able to pinpoint what drove the sales at the store.
Everyone described the store how we sometimes describe the store, which is a clothing store that prints its own shirts. So we looked at other clothing companies and said, well, what do? Oh, they get into cut and sew. That's what we should do. And so you get into cut and sew, but then you realize once you're in it, it's tough because you have to buy a lot of it, so it takes a lot of money to get into huge cut and sew. And then B, our math was off because the jeans are selling slower than the t-shirts. And you realize, people aren't necessarily coming for the articles of clothing, they're coming for the slogans that are on them. And so we're not really a clothing store, we're more like a print design slogan store. We should start putting slogans on everything. So then you start looking like, what else can we put words on? And if you can put words on it, we've tried to. Any new thing you take on, there's gonna be some risk, and you only really know the nuts and bolts of it once you've done it.
Mike's business expanded and expanded and expanded again. They outgrew their old 1,300 square foot space and drew up plans for a new and much larger location only a block away.
When I first started for Mike, there was only 3 people. One was a web, one was a designer, and then it was Mike. And just to see that store location, just a narrow store, and then have them see the wall knocked down to kind of expand off more into a store, and then take off another part of the wall to grab some more space was pretty fun to see.
It blows my mind. I mean, to literally, if from selling t-shirts on the street to being in my parents' basement, to the first weeks of being in a store, you're sitting in there by yourself. I mean, we will sell more today than I sold in my entire first month of, you'd have 2 people walk in all day. it takes so much imagination to see how that would turn into this. This is probably like my greatest accomplishment in life. Some people will say like, I'm most proud of like my kids. And you're like, my wife did most of that. And even still, you know, your kids are their own people and you live with them and build this environment. But this is something, it's like static, like the t-shirts don't spill yogurt on themselves and yell at you. It's, you know, unbelievable to see how far it's come. And when you think about, you know, the people here, you're proud of the people who work here, but also proud that this was something that people would be like, oh, this is more of like an East Coast business. People in Iowa aren't really into that. It's more like Applebee's and Target. And having grown up here, you know, in the back of your mind, you know how, you know, much people here will care about their community and how, you know, really the perception of people from the outside is different from how they are inside. This was something that I always kind of knew would do well here. And you think, you know, the people in the community will support it, and they really have. I mean, people ask us about the website because I think even people in Des Moines can't imagine that Des Moines can support a store like this. And it's like, no, this is the biggest part of the entire company, is people just walking through the door and buying things. So it's an unbelievable thing to be inside of.
A look back on Mike's journey reveals his focus on community, from his pro-Des Moines slogans to the way he treats his employees. Beyond just earning a living, Mike uses his role as an entrepreneur as a platform to make a difference.
One of the lessons we've kind of learned over time, especially with the jeans, is that we worked with factories in China, and all of our shirts are cut and sewn in Los Angeles. And even in the beginning of working with the jeans thing, I wasn't as comfortable with going overseas, but you kind of look at it and you're like, well, other companies do it, it's not that big of a deal. And you really realize that there should be some sort of like core values to your company, that you shouldn't just be a profit-making machine that donates money to breast cancer every once in a while, or picks like a pet project. You really should operate the company with some sort of ethos. If you believe that employees should be well paid, well, you should pay people well. If you believe that local products are important, then you should use local products.
Mike Draper's unique character and electric charm adds to the rich history and culture of the East Village. Even though he had his sights set on leaving Iowa, he found his way back home and created his own opportunity by becoming an entrepreneur. Across the Missouri River from Omaha is the smaller community of Council Bluffs, Iowa. A city of over 60,000 people, Council Bluffs was once known as Canesville, the historic starting point of the Mormon Trail. The city recognizes its heritage as a portal to the West, with monuments and museums, including a salute to America's largest railroad, the Union Pacific. Council Bluffs is also home to over 25 parks, including the centralized Bayless Park. Named after businessman and entrepreneur Samuel Bayless, Bayless Park is filled with sculptures, statues, green space, and the Bayless Park Fountain. 2 blocks to the north of Bayless Park is a revitalized downtown business strip on Broadway Street, which is the home of today's Iowa entrepreneur. Overlooking a high-traffic retail area that has storefronts and sidewalk seating is Third Degree Screening, a business that conducts background checks for businesses across the country. Founder Jeanie Waters got started with background checks in the 1990s.
It started as a court researcher, and we call that kind of the meat and potatoes of background checks. And what a court researcher does is they would get an order from one of the national companies, and you would go into your local courts and you would do a background check on the individual and then report the results back. So basically you were a third party in the whole process.
Jeanie worked as a court researcher both in Council Bluffs covering Pottawatomie County in Iowa and Douglas County in Nebraska. Around the year 2000, technology was shifting information from paper to a digital format. This made the information available for anyone from anywhere. And it threatened the careers of independent court researchers, including Jeanie.
Some of them were public sites, others you had to be a subscriber, etc. And so what the background screening companies tested their waters in was bringing it in-house or sending that work overseas. And so researchers were then stuck after making a certain amount per name. The price went back to you were trying to beat 33 cents a name because it was going overseas.
This took away a lot of work for Jeanie and other researchers and forced some to find alternative employment. But Jeanie had a strong belief that what was being delivered from these outsourced agencies would not fit the bill.
In any background check, the county level search is the key piece. When you've been a court researcher, you learn to understand how the courts work. You understand what's missing in records, what's not, how you can get that information if needed. Where if you're sitting at a desk in California doing a search at the local courthouse here in Iowa or Nebraska, they don't know the ins and outs of our courts. We feel you have to know your areas. So we felt we had the edge on that portion of a search.
Competing against searches that were cheaper in price, Jeanie focused on delivering searches that were richer in content. With this core value, she earned enough contracts to keep busy. But in 2009, Jeanie faced a medical issue that would keep her from her work. She called upon her son Jeanie Waters, a college baseball player at the University of Kansas, for help.
My mom actually had a tumor on her kidney, and so she was just one person shop back then, being on the wholesale side, and she was going to be laid up for a few months. So I came back that winter, and she taught me everything I needed to know on the wholesale side and how to do all the searches and what to report and everything. For about 2 weeks, we just grinded it out. And even though at times I think I got this down, but she was always wanting to double check on my work. And then it finally got to that point where I was doing 1,000 a week, where there were no issues with the work. And then I think she kind of said, okay, now you can go on your own.
Thankfully, the surgery went well for Jeanie, and her road to recovery allowed her research to resume after a few months. But Jimmy wasn't ready to let Jeanie continue to carry the whole load.
But once she was better, I was kind of in the groove on it, and I liked making the money, and so I was like, well, if we both can do this, why don't we just try to gain some more clients on that wholesale side? And that's what she did. So we started getting more clients, and I did that from my junior year in college to 2 years after college when I was playing professional baseball. I was doing that on the bus trips to make ends meet.
While Jimmy's skills improved, Jeanie caught the attention of the federal government's Office of Personnel Management. Jeanie was offered a contract with the stipulation that she first obtain a top-secret security credential.
At that time, most of the people that are offered those positions are retired military, retired law enforcement, retired postal inspector, polygraph examiner. They were from everywhere in the country, but they were mostly all law enforcement. The only ones that were not were someone in the banking industry and me. And it was very, very difficult. It's a manual about this thick, and it's tough.
After 6 weeks of training, Jeanie passed, earning a top-secret security credential and the government contract. Now, in addition to background screening, she was able to provide background investigations. Earning this contract also meant that Jeanie became an approved vendor for the federal government, opening up even more opportunities. Then in 2012, Jeanie Waters, who was continuing to work from the road, decided to hang up his cleats and look for a career beyond baseball. Jeanie saw this as an opportunity and started the company Third Degree Screening. The plan was for the company to break into the business-to-business market instead of working as a third-party contractor. Jeanie and Jeanie Waters were prepared for instant success.
The first year, we gained a few clients, but a lot of that time, especially my time, was busy with paperwork for regulations and different, we had a lot of different things that we had to do that first year. And Jeanie was growing the client base at that point. And so we took a loss the first 2 years, and that was very unusual. That was different for us.
As Jeanie made her way through the piles of paperwork, she quickly realized how big of a jump it was to go from working as a contractor to operating as a business.
It was an extremely big jump, especially because, and actually it was a bigger jump than I thought it would be, because I did have a lot of relationships with background screening companies. However, once we made the jump to business, they saw us as a competitor. And so it was a lot harder getting started than I thought it would be.
Jeanie works on growing the client base, while Jeanie focuses on the background investigations. Third Degree Screening has seen their growth surpass 400% following that first year.
And it's really funny how things grow. You end up with, we have a large base of business out of Texas and out of Colorado. And basically that just starts from one client that you perform very well for, just word of mouth. As I mentioned, we just hired a business consultant for sales just yesterday. And everything before that's been all organic growth. All 100% organic. What it comes down to for us is we have seen and worked each side of the industry, right? And so once you've seen and worked, you can figure out the gaps. And we know how to fill the gaps. And basically that's what we started selling ourselves on.
Through all of this growth, she has held firm to her core value that quality work is better than cheaply priced work, a value that has helped her earn the trust of many of her clients.